How many of you know how to cook? Ayan, parang konti lang, no? Probably this is not a good illustration to begin with. Magtatanghalian na. But me, I like to eat. But of course, because you like that, you at least have to learn basics of cooking. Now, this is not a sermon about cooking, but this is an amateur's perspective about it. Now, whenever we talk about cooking, you can spend a number of minutes, probably hours, in preparing a dish. You can even purchase very good utensils or cookwares to prepare your dish. But do you agree with me? Without the proper ingredients, flavorings, especially yung spices, the outcome of the dish is not as good as if you have them or you don't have them, right? Now, in connection to our lives, it's the same thing. God may allocate you with certain number of decades here on earth. But if we do not have the right components, like for example, the fruit of the Spirit from Galatians 5:22 onwards, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, up until self-control, the outcome of your life, the upgrading of your character will be different compared to if you don't have it, right? So there's really a need for us to have these things. And it's not simply challenged by God that we focus on developing it for nothing. God wants us to have these qualities in our lives because it will help not only in our personal growth in character, it will help in our interaction or relationships, and definitely it will help as we follow the model of Jesus Christ. So we'll be talking about patience. You know, 1 Corinthians 13 is otherwise known as the love chapter of the Bible. We usually hear this during engagement ceremonies and weddings, right? But are you aware, it's not about romantic love. I'm not saying you cannot use it for talks about family or husband-wife relationship or romantic love, just like in weddings. But what I'm trying to tell you is that the whole intention of why Paul wrote this is because of a problematic congregation. It's called the Church of Corinth. Now, maybe you're asking, isn't that church a church na strong? Actually, they're a strong church. So strong that they actually use their energies and capabilities against each other. And so Paul is trying to tell them, you cannot have this. Because if you attack each other, it will complicate your Christian witness. It will affect your being able to edify one another. And you will not be able to serve according to the intentions of Jesus. Now, maybe you're asking, aren't they a gifted congregation? Maybe the members are not as gifted as other churches. No. On the contrary, they're spiritually gifted. But the problem is, they used it as a platform to be proud and become boastful. And Apostle Paul is saying, well, you cannot have it that way. Because that will run contrary to being considerate towards other people. And not only that, so you cannot follow the illustration and the example of Christ of living a life of humility. There has to be an adjustment. And that's the reason why we have to be given biblical or heavenly principles. So that what we desire and how we're doing things will align and will go in the same direction. Because I do believe, like me, you also have the intention of glorifying Christ in your lives, correct? This is the intention. I think the Church of Corinth also has that intention. But the problem is personal desires, selfish ambitions came into the picture. That's why, as much as they would like to glorify the Lord, what they are doing actually went contrary to that, and they fought with each other. So Paul is saying we have to understand there are certain elements that have to be added in our lives, and we have to adjust it according to the format of Christ. By doing that, there will be an improvement in our character and in our interpersonal relationships. Now, look at this. When we talk about love, usually we just simply define it as an emotion. I'm not saying it's not, but there's more to it than that. Love, if you look at it from the Bible's perspective, it's a verb. There are two things that you can find in 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 4 to 7. That part of love which we call proactive. If you say you love a person, can you be kind towards that person? Now, what is kindness? Kindness is compassion in action. Can you look at that person, fill up that person's needs? Can you sacrifice so that person will actually be helped and you become an instrument? If you say you love that person, you have to be kind. Second, if you say you love that person, can you be patient with that person? Can you be considerate towards that person's condition? And can you be considerate towards that person's need? So that's what you call being proactive. If I say I love a person, but I'm not kind, I'm not patient towards that person, my intentions can be questioned. Now, there's a second. If you say you love someone, there's what we call the preventive aspect of love. You practice self-control. Now, the issue of the Corinthian congregation, there was pride, there was boasting, there was actually arrogance and rudeness. The whole point of the matter is that it's a sign of immaturity. Now, what is immaturity? By definition, it is a person's inability to deny or delay gratification. And bottom line, it's a selfish act. You only want what you want to be served. And you're not thinking about how others can be benefited by your action. Now, for example, rudeness. Let's focus on that. I think you will agree with me that if you a person, no, you apply respect in your relationship with the person. The way you talk to that person, the way you deal with that person is different compared when you take out respect. You'll find yourself sometimes in a situation wherein the relationship is not ideal. There will be conflict. And there are times since we are overwhelmed by negative emotions and the memory of the bad that was done to us. We pull out respect. And so that's the time we become rude. When we talk to the person, it's different. We say words that offend and hurt. And when we treat that person, when it's devoid of respect, it's totally different. We're no longer sympathetic towards that person's situation because either we're mad, we're too sad, we're angry, and we would like that relationship to have a disruption. So, these are the realities. When we talk about patience, it's an ingredient that we need for the betterment of the situation. We're not yet perfect here on earth, but at least there will be an upgrading of our interaction with one another. And remember, 1 Corinthians 13, when it was written by Apostle Paul, the intention is that we don't use it as a weapon towards others. How can the Word of God be a weapon towards others? You can say it this way, oh, you have to be patient with me, huh? You have to be kind to me, huh? That's how it's done, if you're going to use it as a weapon or a tool for your advantage. But how is it being taught? Here's the principle. You learn it, and then now that you know about it, put it to heart, and then apply it, invest it in your relationship. You will take the initiative to be the one to have to input it in your human interaction rather than demand it from somebody else. So that's very important. Why? Well, I would like you to look at the quotation from Joyce Meyer. She said, patience is not simply the ability to wait. It is how we behave while we're waiting. How many of you have been irritated because you're trying to work out a government document and it's taking, if not hours, it's taking days, if not months, sometimes years, right? Quite annoying, it's irritating. There are times you're caught up in traffic, or sometimes even parking, right? And because there is what we call a sense of urgency. Maybe you have to talk to a person, you're already running late, and you don't have a parking spot, everybody in front of you is moving too slow, you get affected, you get agitated. So what happens? The behavior changes, correct? It gets triggered. That's why patience is not simply the ability to wait. Sometimes you cannot make fast the whole procedure. It's still the same number of hours, it's still the same number of days, still the same number of months. But how we act matters. So it's a matter of attitude. Now let's define attitude. It is your mental and emotional response to the circumstances of your life. And even experts are in agreement. Attitudes are chosen. You can choose to cope in a certain situation. You can choose not to cope. You can choose to behave properly, or you can choose to behave rudely in a specific situation. It's your choice. But you have to make a decision because the outcome, depending on which one you choose, will be different. Now, Uh, second week of April, we went to Japan. So when we were there, it was a nice experience. No, I was telling my wife, it's her birthday. We visited our daughter who was studying there, and the cherry blossoms were late in blooming, and we were able to catch it. Sabi ko, even nature is waiting for you. Romantic, romantic line. But then that's not the whole thing. Going home, of course, you need to fall in line. You know, these technological things, when I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but to make it easier, there's a passport reader that's digital, correct? Have you ever, here in the Philippines, we also have that. Now, there's a mother and a daughter. The mother was a senior citizen, and she was quite slow, of course, but she was trying her best. Now, the daughter was assisting her to make fast the whole procedure. But there's a man between that mother and daughter, me and my wife. There's a man, also Filipino, who was supposed to be next. He couldn't wait. And he was saying these words, ang bagal-bagal naman. And so now, the old lady is starting to panic, and it's making the whole procedure longer. I'm thinking to myself, if you just kept quiet, wala namang reward sa dulo. I don't see any trophies or any monetary reward that if you are ahead of that line, you'll get something. We will be boarding the same plane. And it's just a matter of a few minutes. So, because he kept on talking and the old lady was starting to panic, the daughter spoke out and said, you can just be patient with her. She's trying her best. Matatapos din naman. Ang bagal kasi. So that's what happened in Japan. Now, it's a good thing. Praise God for that. He's not my seatmate on the plane, no? Because sometimes talagang, these funny situations, you are irritated with some situation, then suddenly that person and you are seatmates. No? This time, that did not happen. So, but the funny thing was, when we were in the Philippines, the line, the mother and the daughter, him again, and me and my wife, I said, parang God has indeed a sense of humor, right? The first proof daw that God has a sense of humor is that He created you. No. Joke lang, baka magalit kayo. But the thing was, here he was again. Here in Naiya, the old lady was doing the same thing. She wanted the whole procedure to be fast, but of course, it's dependent on the scanner. But he's saying this. Sabi niya, sa Japan ganyan, dito ganito pa din. I'm thinking to myself, sa Japan ganyan ka na, nasa Pilipinas na tayo, ganito ka pa rin. It's 1 a.m. What are we chasing after? There's nothing there. I mean, after getting out of this, we get our bags, we go home. It's just a few minutes, right? So remember this. Patience is not simply the ability to wait. It is how we behave while we are waiting. Because remember, we would like to contribute in the health of a relationship. You understand this? And what is a healthy relationship? We would like to minimize the abuse. Because if the abuse in the relationship is dominant, that becomes a toxic relationship. And patience, if we apply it and have it invested in our human interaction, will improve it. And that's the same thing that is also modeled and taught by Jesus Christ. Now, why are we being encouraged, even commanded, to add patience to our character? Look at Proverbs chapter 14, verse 29. And here you will understand why. Now, this passage is called a contrast. You're being shown what is good in contrast to something that is bad. Now, let's look at this. Whoever is patient has a great understanding. You agree? But one who is quick-tempered displays folly. So what is it trying to solve in our lives? Impulsivity. Masyado tayong impulsive. Now, remember these words, no? Gaano ka man katama, kung habang pinapatunayan mong ikaw ay tama, mukha ka namang may tama, mali ka pa rin. Now, you have to record it this time, and I'll repeat it. Or you can ask the tech team for a copy of this message. But remember these words. Gaano ka man katama, kung habang pinapatunayan mong ikaw ay tama, mukha ka namang may tama, mali ka pa rin. Right? Because it's how we're behaving. Maybe you have a point. Maybe you're on the right. But how you behave also matters. So remember, in communication, it's the same thing. Whenever you're communicating with a person, remember the 3 elements. The first one, how's your vocabulary? Because there are times we're overtaken by our negative emotions, and what comes out of our mouths are not so good words. We have to have control. Second, the tone of voice. And then the third, how is your nonverbal behavior? You have gestures. Sometimes with the use of a finger, sometimes with your fist, and sometimes the actions that we make is also intended to send out a negative signal. All those things we also have to consider. So patience is very important. We're not perfect. That's the reason why we're being told on what we need to add to our lives so that there is a control, again, towards impatience or impulsivity. Now, remember, patience is a form of action. Now, how is this the case? I'm just sitting there and waiting. How is that a form of action? Well, maybe it has something to do also with your engaging the process and engaging people. How come? For example, if something bad is done to you, the automatic and the practical thinking that we have is that I have to retaliate in kind. But then, the Bible tells us, never repay evil for evil. You know why? Because there is a tendency that when we don't feel good, di ba, we will be expressing the same things. And we're thinking, it's justice. Now, I helped some companies, and this is a story some years ago. One of the employees told me, Pastor, my supervisor shouted at me, and he used not so good words. He cursed at me. Sabi ko, ganun ba? So what did you do? I shouted at him as well, and also used bad words. Pero okay lang yun, Pastor. No? Sabi ko, ang lakas naman ng loob mo. How are you able to do that? When he's already inside the office, that's the time I said it. He did not hear it. Pero okay lang yun, Pastor. He started it. I'm just trying to respond. Alam mo, sometimes that's the problem, no? When people are asking for the pastor's approval, or kaya sometimes I'm having a hard time nodding my head. Because as a human being, I want to nod my head. He started it, you're just responding, okay lang. But then as a general principle, why do you think the Lord is telling us, do not repay evil for evil? And an insight came to me, and I told him this. For example, the Lord Jesus Christ came after your incident. And then you came up to Christ and say, my supervisor, he shouted at me. He used not so good words. And then the Lord will confront that person and say, what you did was wrong. And then the Lord will face you. So what did you do? I shouted at him, Lord. I also used bad words. Pero he did not hear it. So okay lang naman, di ba, Jesus? What do you think? Do you think the Lord will be saying to you, very good. That's it, my boy. You are a very good believer in me. No, because you also did something bad. It's categorized as bad. You're in the same category now. You belong to the same class and cluster. So that's the reason why the Lord wouldn't want us to retaliate in the same way. Do not repay evil for evil. Because in the end, you will be evil yourself. I know. This is not easy to do. Probably you're saying, Pastor, it's easier said than done. Right? You're thinking that. But what do you think? If we commit to this action, which is negative, do you think it's affirming? Will the Lord affirm this behavior? Of course not. That's the reason why we're being taught the ingredients of improvement. Because that behavior is not what is acceptable in the teaching and in the pattern of Christ's life. And that's what we want, to live a Christ-like life. Hey, Pastor, I cannot be like God. No, it's not godness that he's talking about. Christ in Romans 8:29 obeyed the will of the Father. It's a matter of obedience so that we will improve. Now, patience is also a form of action because instead of you retaliating, you're controlling yourself from doing that. That control is a form of action. Or there are times you just want to adjust and you would like to be the bigger person. Di ba? You extend yourself. So it's a form of action. Not easy to do. But definitely if you apply what the Lord is saying, the outcome will be different. Correct? So this is very important for us. Now, moving forward. When we talk about patience, patience has at least 3 recipients. The first one, patience with people or with others is called love. Now, at the beginning of this year, I was talking to a guy. He told me, Pastor, my father is losing his memory But after office, when I go back home, I tell the caregiver I'll handle my dad for the moment. I'll clean him, feed him, and I would like to perform my duty as a son. But he said, it's not easy, Pastor. Since he does not remember me, most of the time he asks me, who are you? And there are times he's hostile, Pastor. He says not so good things, and sometimes he pushes me. And that's really hurtful. But I try to look back. My dad, when he didn't have this problem yet, he's a very good father. He provides for us. He cares for us. He's really a good dad, Pastor. And I'm trying to do this, trying to be patient because I love him. Right? That's one of the things that we are able to do. Sacrifice for others if we have patience because we love the person. But if that's not present, it's hard to do that. Second, patience with self is hope. Now, how many of you have failed before? Yan, konti lang, no? The others who did not raise their hands, that's your second failure. The failure to admit yung reality. No. Now, the thing is, we all have this. It's a common human experience. The problem with failure, it has a twin brother. It's called rejection. When you fail, somehow you feel people don't like you anymore. Or probably they don't like you at all because wherein you fail, you basically failed them. Some people are seeing it that way. There's a possibility of that. Now, when we fail, there is a great chance that we see ourselves with no future anymore. And that particular failure become your own life label. I'm a failure. And you know what? It may not be coming from others, the criticism. It may be coming from yourself. They call that the self-critical personality. Wala ka nang ginawang tama. You're really a failure. You're doing nothing right. You really are a hopeless person. Don't. Yes, there are times we become victims of our own negative view of self. There are times we become the victims of the negative view of other people towards us. But it is very important that you see the third perspective, the perspective of the Creator, the perspective of the Savior towards you. You know why in the Bible it is stated you're created in the image of God? Because the Lord values you. You're fearfully and wonderfully made. He placed potentials in your life like spiritual gifts, talents, gifts, and abilities. Right? The reason why the Bible keeps on emphasizing these points is because the Lord knows very well in our broken state, what I just showed you is a possibility. Maybe you're not seeing that there's any hope for you at all. Don't. Look at it from God's perspective, and you will see a better view of yourself. It helps you recover and then regain a sense of balance in your existence. But also, patience, you have to apply it to God. Maybe some of your eyebrows are raised. Apply it to God. Well, yes, because of at least two things. Let's talk about prayer, for example. How many of you, when you request God something, you want the answer now? How many of you are feeling bad if the Lord is not yet answering your prayers? Di ba? And that's the reason why we have to be patient with God and still hold on to Him. Because I think it was a few years back when I spoke here, I talked to you about prayer. And remember these 4 statements. If the request is wrong, God will answer it, but the answer is a no. If the timing is wrong, God will say slow. If you are wrong, something needs to be improved in your life, God will say grow. But if the request is right, the timing is right, and you are right, God will say go. So remember, He's God and I am not. And according to Solomon in Ecclesiastes 3, God makes everything beautiful in His time, not my time. Right? That's why even though the Lord does not answer your prayers yet, there's a very important factor there. Be steadfast. Hold on. Believe that the Lord is working even though you're not seeing it. Because sometimes we apply on the Lord emotional blackmail. What is that? I think this will be something you'll be familiar with. I'm praying, you're not answering my prayers. I won't read the Bible anymore. I won't go to fellowships na. Wala naman eh. I won't go to worship service. I won't, di ba? I won't. It's as if God will lose something from your actions. He won't lose anything from that. You lose a lot, right? But we cannot force God's hand. His process is His process, and that's the second point. How many of you like trials? Please raise your hands. You don't like trials. But how many of you believe that trials can produce maturity? Please raise your hands. So you're running contrary to the whole process. And that's exactly the same thing for me. If you ask me, Pastor, do you like troubles and trials? Of course, I'll be telling you, I don't. I don't. If I can simply have a shortcut and bypass everything, that from point A, which is my current condition, I can go to point C, which is maturity, what I want to reach in my life, and not pass through point B, which is the process, that's something I would want. But that's not reality. And that's not something that the Bible guarantees. There was a person who asked me before, Pastor, can you pray for me that the Lord will take away all the trials? I told that person, I can't pray for you in that manner. Why, Pastor? I have not prayed that for myself nga eh. Ako nga, Pastor na eh. Dapat ako mag-pray niyan and be exempted for. But because the promise of God, it won't be a truthful prayer. Because the promise of God is that I will never leave you nor forsake you. He will join you and help you in the natural process of maturity and growth. That's it. There are no shortcuts. You look at the writings of John, Paul, Peter, even the Old Testament prophets, even Jesus himself. The things that he said talks about troubles, tribulations. The Beatitudes is about it as well. So remember, these are basically elements that we need for maturity and growth. But why don't we like the process? Because of the length of time and the intensity. We are not aware and we're not feeling secure on how to deal with these things because a lot of things that take place sometimes is beyond our control. And we don't want it, right? I don't like it myself. But again, we have to trust God. Let's go to Abraham. In the book of Genesis, from Genesis 12 to 25, we will be reading that Abraham was called by God at the age of 75. The whole process ended, and he died at the age of 175. How long was the process? 100 years. Imagine that. You know Noah? He was made by God to build an ark. How long was the process? People are thinking a few decades. No. It's about 100 years as well. It's a long process. But then, I'm thinking, Noah, maybe if you're commissioned by God to build an ark in an area that is considered arid or rainfall, maybe if it's in the Philippines, Jay, make an ark, a big one. Maybe it's practical. Lakas ng ulan. You have memories of Ondoy and Habagat. It's okay. But in the location where Job was, rainfall, the amount is not that much. You'll be building an ark. Now, probably you have neighbors who will be asking you questions. Nagkataon, ang pangalan ay Marites and Marisol. You know these names, right? Noah, what are you doing? Well, the Lord told me to build an ark. What's that? No, they're not familiar probably of those things. Well, it's like this. It's going to be used to float on floodwaters. Maybe the guy's thinking you're crazy. And of course, you would like to look for people just like you, and then you'll be telling on Noah, oh, the guy is trying to build an ark. I mean, what, to be irritated by a guy for a few days, sometimes you would like to raise up your hands and give up. Or you would like to basically give in to your negative emotions and say something and do something bad to the person because you're agitated. If 100 years, it's a thing back then. They are living hundreds of years. Praise God, we're not going to be living those number of years. But the thing was, it's not an easy process. But trusting God, and imagine this. If, for example, si Noah started to give up on the idea. Wala naman siguro, my neighbors are right. And then the floods came. And now, because the Lord intended on saving 8 people, Noah and his family, probably you're holding on to a log floating in the middle of the water. And then your wife on the other side shouting at you, because you did not believe in God now, we're all holding on to these logs. with all the animals on top of our backs. Maybe it's like that. So remember, it's a good thing he followed, it's a good thing he obeyed. And it is very important. Now, patience with God is faith. You have to have that faith. And it's important in our interaction with the Lord. Now, let's look at our takeaways. How do we grow in patience? The first one, you have to accept discomfort. Now, this is a reality. There won't be ideal situations for you always. And the people that you will be interacting with, they will not respond to you and treat you the way you expect. There will always be that possibility. You accept this? Now, related to this. This story is about 20 years ago. No? I was a younger pastor. I was invited by a pastor in Palawan to speak in their youth camp. So I went. When I went there, I had my luggage. It's a very big suitcase filled with clothes for speaking. When I went there, all of them were wearing shorts and regular shirts because we're supposed to be riding a bangka, a big one, a fishing boat, in the big river, and then it's going to go out in the ocean, and then we'll be looking for this islet, and the camp was going to be held there. Now, I was looking at the bangka I was riding on. There's sacks of rice, but no materials for building a tent. So I asked one of the organizers, where will we sleep? We have this, yung pangtaga. Yung tabak. They call it binangon in Visayan. They'll be chopping off leaves of palm trees, and they told us that we will be using that as a makeshift tent to sleep in for 5 days. We're 200 people. Imagine if you're 200 here, it's this number. I'm thinking to myself, we will actually kill all the trees there. Not only that, I'm thinking, what will we be eating aside from the rice? So I asked, ano yung ulam? As I told you in the introduction, I like eating, and I would like to know what we'll be eating. And I was told, well, Pastor, they have fishing rods. We'll be fishing, and it's an act of faith. Yes, I like faith, but not during meal times. We will be catching fish. We were 200. And then the pastor followed it up. Don't worry, Pastor, if we don't catch fish, they have air guns with them. We will be shooting squirrels. Squirrels? I'm thinking to myself, how do you eat a squirrel? But this was the actual answer. Now, that did not happen because that bangka I was riding in capsized. Now, it's a good thing. Now, I'm still alive. So I was able to survive that. It's a summertime, so the river was quite low, and it's a low tide, and the embankment was quite high. Now, I want you to understand one thing about this big river. How many of you have gone to Puerto Princesa to the crocodile farm? Okay. How many of you have seen that glass case that has the skeletal remains of a big crocodile? Now, that crocodile was caught in that river. I was told by these people. And then I asked them, one of them, a wise guy, I asked him, do you still have crocodiles here? Because when we went down the murky waters, as I pull up my leg every time from the mud, eels were coming out. So I'm thinking to myself, maybe there are other creatures here. It's one of the forested areas of Palawan. Well, the guy answered me, wala naman, Pastor. Maliliit lang. And so I started to run and went up the embankment, and they were all shocked. I almost walked on water. So they're asking me, why are you so scared? I told them, if there are small crocodiles, definitely there's a mama and papa crocodile, and that's what I'm afraid of. Maybe you might step on it and then suddenly attacks you. We cannot even see them. It's so murky. And they all started to run towards the embankment as well. But you know what? I wanted to give up on that. I really wanted to give up. I wanted to go home. I'm all wet, muddy. My bag was wet. Everything I have to wear was there. And I'm thinking to myself, what are we going to do now? So they decided we go back to the church and just hold it there. I wanted to go home. It's a good thing. Good sense and patience overtook irritation. Because the whole thing succeeded. And I have to admit to you, that's one of those very good memories I have of ministry. It was really a victory for the Lord. they would have experienced that victory even if I'm not there. I'm expendable in the first place, right? Because the Lord's work, He will raise up somebody else to do the job. But it's a good thing I was able to see how that impacted the lives of others. So after that camp, I was told by the pastor, you can go to Club Noah if you're aware of that resort. It was still open during that time. You can do a day tour. So I went for a little bit of rest and relaxation since the whole camp was already over. When I was about to go home after the day tour, there was a young lady who was giving me a shirt of Club Noah. I said, I did not order. No, it's yours. I don't have money to pay. It's expensive for a shirt. No, he said, I'm not going to make you pay. I paid for it. It's discounted for us. I'm a staff here. If you don't remember me, Pastor, I'm part of the camp. I was blessed by that experience, and I would like to give you this. I mean, it's not the shirt alone. It's not knowing that somebody appreciated what took place. But it could have been missed by me if I allowed the impatience to overtake good sense. Right? It's a good thing. Now overrule. Now, look at this passage. I like this passage, but it's an intriguing passage from James, chapter 1, verses 2 to 3. Now, we don't like the troubles, but it will come. So how do we accept them? So patience also has something to do with the way you look at things. Allow me to read to you the verse, and then try to figure it out how James was able to come up with this. With the help of the Spirit of God, when troubles of any kind come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy. You're seeing it now? Pag may troubles ka daw, magsaya ka. I mean, that's contradictory to my experience, but look at what he said in the second part. This is how he was looking at it. For you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. Not easy to absorb? But that's true. That's why James is also saying in James chapter 1, verse 12, blessed is the man who, di ba, was able to overcome and endure the trials. Remember that there will be, in the end, a reward, the crown of life that will be given over to us by Christ. Imagine that, no? So that's part of it. Accept discomfort. There's a second. In connection to human interaction, the second way to grow in patience is practice the discipline of forgiveness. Discipline means training. You have to be, the patient person gives God time to act, and the patient person considers the consequences before he or she acts. And true. My mom, there are four pastors in the family. Me, my brother Jebo, if you know him, my father, of course, and my brother-in-law, all pastors. But the most authoritative speaker is my mom. Why? Because all of us, especially as children, will consult with her. So in my years of ministry, I always come to my mom and say, I had a conflict with so-and-so. Why is this person behaving like this? Sometimes you would like a person to agree with you, lalo na nanay mo. My mom, she's trying to be fair. If it's the right thing to do to affirm you because what you're doing is right, then she will say yes. But if she sees something wrong with the way you're processing things, she will actually tell you. So you know what she told me? Tiisin mo yan. Tiisin ko, nahirapan na nga ako, that's why I'm coming to you. Sabi niya, you know what? Baka mamaya sa langit, kapitbahay mo yan. Maybe that person becomes your neighbor in heaven. Ano sabi ba ni Jesus? In my Father's house are many rooms. I will be going there to prepare one for you. May kaaway ka ngayon. But it's a brother and sister in Christ. Your room 101 and room 102 siya. Magkatabi kayo. And you will be worshiping the Lamb on the throne side by side. So my mom keeps on telling me, as much as this is an irritating way of explaining it, you have to practice to deal with this because later on you will be together serving Jesus and worshiping Jesus. I'm thinking to myself, this is theologically true, but I cannot accept it. It's hard, but it's correct, right? And that's the whole point. The congregation of Corinth, and later on we'll be reading Ephesians 4:2. The congregation of Ephesus, they're not perfect congregations. There will always be that. Differences in personalities, differences in opinions. There will be offenses that will be done. Now, there was a person back then. Sabi niya, Pastor, if somebody offends me, I pray for that person. It's a good thing I asked what prayer. Kunin na sana ni Lord. Have you ever prayed that prayer? It's a good thing. Our prayers, it's not what God answers all of the time, our requests, because we make insensible and insensitive prayers at times, especially when we're mad. Now, let me see a show of hands. How many of you have been offended by somebody? Please raise your hands. Okay. Now, how many of you have offended somebody? Be honest, you're in church. Please raise your hands. Okay. Now, if the Lord answers our prayers of taking the person who has offended us, ubus tayo dito. We won't be having this worship service. Correct? The Lord has His ways of dealing with us and making us mature and that relationship to also be corrected. And look at Ephesians 4:2. It's in the form of the command. Always be humble and gentle. Be patient with each other, making allowance for each other's faults because of your love. I remember, I was also doing a message on Philippians chapter 4. Have you ever encountered this verse? Rejoice in the Lord always. And again, I say rejoice. How many of you have known this passage before? You know, one intriguing thing is, why do you keep on repeating the same thing? Rejoice in the Lord always. And again, I say rejoice. Philippians 4, when Paul wrote that, there was an enmity between two people, Judea and Syntyche, former partners in ministry. Now they're at odds with each other. So Paul is saying, you have to overcome that. When you were teammates, there's a very good fruit that came out of that. Now that you're at odds with each other, it's becoming a challenge not only for you, but also for those who are serving side by side with you. You have to overcome this. You know, it's also the passage where he wrote Philippians 4 verse 8. Diba? Whatsoever things are good, whatsoever things are trustworthy, whatsoever things are lovely, think about such things. What Paul is saying, there's an alternative. Because there are times when we are in conflict with a person, we become paranoid. Sa Tagalog, ang tawag nila, nagkakaroon ka ng tamang hinala. This is what happens. So, you have a conflict with a person, that person talks with somebody else and looks your way. Interpretation. They're talking about me, and they started laughing. You're laughing at me. You confront the person. Why are you talking about me and laughing about me? We're not talking about you. Liars! Oh, suddenly, that's how we are when we're mad. We give in to the negative interpretations of things. And Paul very well knows this is possibly happening for Judea and Syntyche. So how do you overcome this? There's an alternative. Rejoice in the Lord. Change the way you feel and think. Whatsoever. There's an alternative. Not easy, but you have to do that. Now, he knows that there will be a recollection of the things that happened, a return of the feelings, and so you have to repeat process. Rejoice in the Lord always, and again, I say rejoice. It makes perfect sense, right? The way to combat it is to have a different way of dealing with it. Again, the attitude. You can choose it. It's not easy, but it has to be done. So the same thing with the congregation of Ephesus. They're not a perfect congregation, but there is a need for improvement. Now the third, there is a purpose in the process. Look at the four things that can improve in our lives if we apply patience. The first one, it can increase your pain capacity. In Filipino, matuto kang magtiis. Second, it will increase your relationship capacity. What does that mean? You will learn to adjust. You cannot expect every time that other people will adjust to you. I cannot control all of you. But in this group, there's only one person I can control. And who is that? Myself. So I need to learn how to adjust. I have to adjust in my relationship capacity. Third, I have to increase my exposure capacity. And I also have to increase my character capacity. Now, let's talk about Joseph, the Old Testament Joseph, from the last chapters of Genesis. You know him, right? His brothers hated him, wanted to kill him, sold him as a slave. But there he practiced self-control. The God factor really mattered there. Why? Because he was being enticed by Potiphar's wife. He did not want to give in to the temptation of sleep with me. Why? He was already in a negative place. He's hurting, and somebody wants him. He could have easily gone there, and then probably he's thinking, nobody will know. But remember this. He considered the respect. Di ba? Respect for God, respect for his master Potiphar, and respect for self. Wasn't easy, but he was still accused unjustly and he was thrown into prison. There he met the two members of the staff of the king of Egypt. He was able to interpret their dreams and eventually endorse to the king, Pharaoh, and he became second in command in Egypt. When he was sold into slavery, he was 17 years old. And then he became royalty in Egypt at the age of 30. 13 years of processing. John Maxwell, in his book, The 21 Laws of Leadership, made mention of this in his Law of the Process. It's not easy. But the God factor mattered, especially when he met up with his brothers. I think he really struggled on what to do with them. You wanted to take revenge. But it's a good thing he took the alternative of probably forgiving them and then giving them the needs that they had because they were also affected by the drought and famine. They were given food. And when his father learned that his son is alive, he went to Egypt and they were able to spend the last days of their lives together. And even honor the request of his father that his remains will be buried back to his land. It could have been missed if he allowed the bitterness, the rage, the desire for vengeance to overtake him. It could have. He could have lost this opportunity. But he did not because the forgiveness was applied. Patience included. So if you would like to have a different outcome, we follow the recommendation of the Lord. It's not easy, but it is very, very useful. Now, let's look at Galatians 6:9. It is stated here, when we do service for God, we need patience. When we would like to grow properly in the faith, there's a need for patience. When we're interacting with people, we need patience. But let this be a reminder given by Paul. Let us not be weary in doing good, for we will reap in due season if we do not give up. And sometimes you're already in the right path, but because you're hurting, you would like to give it up. So you're already following the Lord, you would like to stop. You would like to deviate. I don't want to follow that anymore. I'll just take this path. Something not going there anymore. Or, much worse, you would like to turn back and rebel against the Lord and then walk away. These are tendencies that we have. But we're being encouraged to move on, move forward. In the end, there will be a harvest. There will be an outcome that will be more improved. So, let's conclude using this passage. It's another translation of what we have used in the beginning. Proverbs chapter 14, verse 29. The language is stronger. A patient person is very smart. Who agrees? Okay. But a quick-tempered person makes stupid mistakes. Who agrees? And so let's avoid the second part. And let's commit ourselves to the first part. By the grace of God, have patience. Be part as an ingredient of your character. Because it will change the outcome of how you live, how you interact, and how you behave. Now remember our illustration at the beginning of this message, cooking. You may spend a number of hours preparing a dish, using expensive utensils, equipment to prepare the dish. But without the proper ingredients, flavorings, and seasonings, the outcome of a dish is not as good as if you have them. The same thing with your life and mine. We will be given by God allocated time to live here on earth. By having the right components as introduced by the Lord, there will be improvement. I do hope that we will be able to apply this. God bless you all, and good morning.